I'm Carol Stivers, and I'm standing by the special historical marker that is in Ripley in honor of Charles Young, Colonel Charles Young. We had this plaque put in the Parker Park for Charles Young, who grew up in Ripley. He was the third African American to graduate from West Point. He graduated from Ripley High School in 1881. He went on to West Point, and he stayed in the Army and was a military officer during from 1898 till 1922. His formative years were in Ripley when he lived here. He was born in Mayslick, Kentucky, in a cabin. His mom was an educated African American. His father was listed in the census as illiterate. His mother's name was Arminta. His father's name was Gabriel. Gabriel left Kentucky and escaped to Ohio and joined the Civil War. Actually, John Parker helped him with his entry into the Army, into the Civil War. So after the Civil War, Gabriel came back and got his family out of Mayslick, Kentucky, and they all escaped to Ohio. They lived in Huntington Township near Aberdeen for a little while, and before Charles was 5 years old, they moved to Ripley. The house that they lived in was listed on 4th and Cherry Street. I think that house was destroyed during the 37 flood. But his formative years were in Ripley. Charles was very bright. He helped his mom, who took in laundry. He helped his father, who drove wagons. And he helped with delivery of different things. Charles Young attended the colored schools in Ripley, and when he wanted to do higher learning, he was entered into Ripley High School, where he took languages, math, and the things that he wanted to learn. He was very fluent in several languages. After his graduation from high school, he was also very good at music. He played for his Sunday school and his church. I played piano, but he was also competent in other areas of music. So as he graduated from high school, he became a teacher in the colored school here in Ripley for a couple years. And then an ad was run in the paper that they were giving tests to enter West Point. So the principal of the time of his school encouraged him, and so did John Parker, to take the test. The test was given in Hillsborough, Ohio, and he was the second highest to win his appointment to West Point. So as second place, he didn't really get the appointment. Some other person got the appointment, but that other person dropped out, and so Charles Young was appointed to West Point. So he entered West Point, and he was there and graduated in 1898. After his graduation from West Point, he was assigned to Nebraska and different places in the West, and it was a hard time for an African American because white troops didn't want to take orders from an African American officer, so they usually assigned him to black troops. They became the ones who helped settle the arguments between settlers and Indians out in the West. He had these troops, and he wanted to keep them busy, so he started different things with his troops to keep them busy. He started baseball teams and bands. His music was always a part of his life, and it's sort of the international language anyway. So he was out in the West, and the Indians are the ones that named him the Buffalo Soldiers because of their dark curly hair. And the soldiers did not take this as, they took it as a compliment, because a buffalo is a very big and strong animal. So they were called Buffalo Soldiers. So the Buffalo Soldiers did several things in the West, and then it was time to reassign him. Then he was reassigned to Sequoia National Park, and he was there for only 6 months, But in his 6 months, the troops that he had made roads and did all sorts of things to make the park a better place. They did more in 6 months than the other people who'd worked at Sequoia National Park had done in a year. So actually, there's a tree in Sequoia National Park named the Charles Young tree. As he moved up in military, he finally became a colonel, and I usually refer to him as Colonel Charles Young. When he was in Ripley, he was just Charles Young, but he is one of the most outstanding members of Ripley, and he did many things in the military. At the end of his life, he even was an attaché to Liberia. Actually, he fought in the Mexican War too, and that's where he picked up yellow fever. And yellow fever was what really was the end of his career, and he died in Libya. But then his wife and other people who knew how important he was had him come back, and he is buried in Arlington Cemetery. As I stand next to this marker on Locust Street in Ripley, it tells of the different accomplishments that he did. So I hope that you will take time to stop. Look, Ripley has several historical markers, but this one of Charles Young is in the Parker Park on the Locust Street side. Parker was actually a part of his life when he was growing up in Ripley, because Charles Young and the Parker girls were the same age, and the girls were really interested in music, and as I said, Charles Young was too. So the Parker Park is really glad to have this marker here. This whole effort was a contribution from Ripley Heritage in Ripley and the Parker Society, and members collected money to get the marker so that we can tell the whole world about Charles Young, Colonel Charles Young. Thank you.